Hello everybody, welcome. I'm No02 and thank you for watching this video. We're going to be talking about Children of the Worm, the expansion, the second expansion, expansion number 2, that just got added to Back 4 Blood. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it worth it? Pretty common questions you'll hear a lot of the times people will ask. You'll see it in the streamer chats all the time. We'll be going over just about all of the content in a very general sense, and whether or not it's good or bad. Essentially, here check the timestamps, right? But I'll be breaking it all down into we'll talk about Dan in a general sense. We'll talk about Act-5, and then we'll talk about duffel bags. You know what I'm saying? Duffel bags. That's right. And I'm sure many of you who are playing Act-5 right now probably all have an opinion on duffel bags now. But let's start off easy. Let's begin real easy here. Let's talk about Dan first. Dan is the new cleaner that they added. He's the new cleaner that they added here. This is him. I gotta say, I like Dan quite a bit. Quite a bit. Act 5 feels like it's almost exclusive. It's like made for him. It's like Dan's origin story, essentially, which is unique to him already, comparatively to all the cleaners. Hank and Charisse, they sort of like were just like plugged into the game, and essentially the way Charisse and Hank interact with each other and with the other cleaners, they act like they've been there the whole time. Like they've always been a part of Camp Fort Hope, essentially. They've been part of the regular cleaner teams, etc., etc. Dan, though, he's introduced in Act 5. And there's a cutscene that talks about why he's there at Fort Hope and what's going on and why the cleaners at this point in time are accompanying him on this little mission that they're going on. Already super unique to him comparatively to everyone else. But Dan is loud. He's kind of mean. He's as far as I know, he's either a con man or the leader of a cult. And well, I think in that sense, you might be kind of, they're one and the same, aren't they? Right? And so already, like, Dan, I think, is by far like the most interesting character in the game. Just he's crazy, he's wacky, he's wild, he's all over the place. And just like comparatively to all the other cleaners who are a little bit more grounded and down to earth, Dan sort of does that nice contrast of like, if you want comedic value, you have somebody normal with somebody crazy and they interact with each other, and that makes comedy. And that's how sitcoms work. Now, you know. But just with all of that sort of combined together, I think Dan as a character is just far more interesting than almost all of the other cleaners in general. Now, Hoffman's still my favorite. Hoffman's great, right? Hoffman's got his quirks about him, you know. I love Holly's voice lines. Holly's got really funny voice lines, but I think just in general, Dan sort of just lends himself to being one of the most interesting characters in the game now. Very cool to see. In addition to that, Dan's got these abilities. We'll have a separate video where I go more in depth about how to play Dan and what's going on with his abilities and give you all the details of how his character works and how we can build decks around him and the concepts around it. But already, in addition to Dan being the most interesting character in the game, I think, he also has a pretty interesting character ability where he himself and the team get stronger the worse the team performs. It's sort of a mechanic similar to Hang, but Hang is individual based, where it's only if he performs poorly, Hang produces more stuff. For Dan, though, it's the entire team. The worse you do, the stronger you get. In a very like general sense. And so I think mechanically, gameplay wise, that actually ends up lending itself to what I think is going to be very interesting deck compositions. He's going to be really strong in quick play, weaker and pre-made teams. Possibly a good character in Swarm, though nobody's playing Swarm. Don't worry about it. Right? So I think already, like mechanically, he's more interesting than a lot of the other characters as well. Other characters are giving like a plus this number to the team, and then this team gets this plus number, and he's got these plus numbers. And for the most part, those are enough to work around and play around with when it comes to deck creation and making a character that does something specific, right? And of course, different characters will lend themselves better to different play styles and things like that. But for Dan, I think it's a little bit more unique. It falls into the same unique area that Hang has, but Dan's is team-wide and Hang's is individual. And I actually don't think that's a downside for Hang. It's just different. But different enough, right, that it, I think, really lends itself to what can be interesting deck design choices and things like that. So very, very cool. That's about it. I have. We'll talk more about Dan later on and more specifically about what he does. But I think overall, Dan is a super cool addition to the game, just in the general sense. So, let's talk about Act 5. Act 5 is a 6-mission campaign, and it has 2 AAA cutscenes. That's right, 2 AAA cutscenes. Well, maybe we'll come back to that. Overall, I actually had a lot of fun playing Act 5. A lot of fun. A lot of fun. I was super happy to see that they incorporated more use speed based mechanics, because that felt like a mechanic that like almost exclusively happened in Act 1. Other than like using medkits or other items like that, like you didn't really care about use speed in a lot of missions. In Act 5, it's literally everywhere, and I just love to see that in general. The thing that's always going to sort of separate Back 4 Blood from other games, or Left 4 Dead specifically, is that it has more mechanics. It has more things going on, and sort of this foundation of like, you got use speed and different character cards and different attachments for the guns, and you can build decks of cards and things. All these mechanics come together and make what can be potentially quite a dynamic play experience and things like that. And so I was really happy to see that Act 5, I think, embraced that a little bit by just incorporating the breaching charges mechanic into a lot of the into pretty much every single mission, and just more value out of the use speed. The bear traps also got value out of the use speed and things like that. Kind of cool to see. Act 5 had, I think, has some really cool environments, from being in, I don't want to spoil it, but just like some really nice urban environments to being inside buildings, underground, and over there and over this, and shanty towns. I thought it was super cool. Just in general, the world that you sort of got to play through in Act 5. Act 5 was super fast, super punchy, action-paced, but maybe not, but maybe for the wrong reasons potentially. But I actually had a lot of fun playing through Act 5. And it's important to note too, right, that when it comes to the story and the plot of Act 5, it's a skeleton plot. But so is Back 4 Blood. So is all of Left 4 Dead. It's just the faintest hint of plot that's going, something's sort of going on, and you sort of get to learn a little bit about it. And when it comes to Act 5, its skeleton plot, it's by far the most interesting and best skeleton plot or story that is compared to all of the other acts, even combined, right? Like what's going on in Act 5, I think is super interesting, super cool. Really, I was really excited to learn about it and learn more about what's happening in the world here and what's getting into the nitty-gritty details of it all. But you don't get there. It never really happens. And of course, in a game like this, part of the replay experience is you go through an act, you go through a campaign, and you get dialogue. You get environmental storytelling here or there. Characters talking about this. I did play with different characters, and they have different voice lines for these areas, and all of it are little bits of information, little teases, little pieces to the puzzle that might help you see what's happening here. Sort of helps you develop the story a little bit over time, and encourages the player, just from that aspect, to potentially play through the game again with different characters, or to hope to try and hear different voice lines and things like that. Kind of a neat idea, kind of a neat concept. But all of it sort of just lends itself to it being a real tease. Oh, I'm supposed to be showing you. These are the missions. These are the missions for Act 5 here. But ultimately, it is just a skeleton plot where we get the tease of a story, but there's no real substance to it in the end. And I don't think that's going to be a real spoiler to you guys. There's no real resolution. And there's something really cool and interesting happening here, but you'll really never get to learn about it. And there'll be loose ends. And I guess technically it ends on a cliffhanger, but not really. It ends on much of a cliffhanger as the Abomination does, technically. So, when it comes to Act 5, super fun to play through, happy about the mechanics. The story that we get is super cool. There's just not a lot of it. And sort of the annoying thing about it is there's actually two cutscenes for Act 5. Two separate cutscenes. A cutscene that opens up. It actually has some really cool art in it in the first cutscene. Also got whatever the live, whatever pre-rendered animation stuff going on. I don't know about it, but it's got essentially a AAA cutscene at the beginning and a AAA cutscene at the end. It feels a little overkill to commit, I don't know, two decently sized cutscenes for 6 missions when the base game had 2 for all of it, essentially, right? And again, those cutscenes, other than the first cutscene, sort of setting up the plot that begins Act 5. I mean, the cutscenes don't really do anything to explain anything at all. I just feel like it's like wasted space. I think, not that we can assume that, oh, if they would have cut these cutscenes, if they would have removed these cutscenes, there would be another mission. There could be more playable content. I'm not saying that, but it sort of feels like that. It sort of just feels like I would just want more missions, and I would want those missions to tell me the story, as opposed to you guys having a cutscene that doesn't tell me any story. The cutscene is just like trying to be cool for the sake of being cool, and that's about it. And if you're into that, that's great. But I think overall, when it comes to developing the game into a particular direction, I just feel like it's a missed opportunity to have these super fancy sort of AAA looking cutscenes, but not have any real substance to them other than that they're maybe cool to watch. And this isn't a freaking Kirby game. If you don't know anything about Kirby, Kirby has some of the most wild freaking cutscenes, like finales of all time. If you watch the latest Kirby game, you know what I'm talking about. Kirby, right? But anyways, so I just feel like in that sense, Act 5 really fun to play through, new mechanic, or at least the reinforcement of older mechanics, cool aesthetics, cool environments, cool story that's going on, but ultimately lacks the substance that I was sort of I wasn't expecting it or hoping for it, but once they introduced what was happening in the story, I was like, oh man, this is super cool. I wonder what's going on. You never really get to know. And it's like, oh, well, I guess that's like everything else in the game, right? The Ridden are making a big resurgence, right? That's how Act 1 begins, a resurgence. The Ridden, we thought they were sort of dying off, and now they're back stronger before with new mutations. They're vomiting on us. This is so crazy. What's happening? You never really get to learn what's happening. It just sort of ends with like, oh man, there's a big old monster. Let's kill it. Cool. Mission over. Slap the Back for Blood logo on it. Ship it. And Act 5 sort of does the same thing, which just, I think, in general, I'm sort of going in a circle now. Overall, I enjoyed Act 5. It was a lot of fun. Has the best plot in the entire game, but has the same failings as all of the other content in Back 4 Blood, is that there's actually no real substance to it in the end. Other than that, if you enjoy the replay cycle of Back 4 Blood in general, you're going to enjoy playing Act 5 quite a bit. If you are not if you're not one of the try-hard players like myself, right, the Back 4 Blood enjoyers, you'll play through Act 5 a couple of times, try out a couple of the new cards, you'll have your fun with it, and then you'll leave. And that's totally normal and totally fine. But ultimately, Act 5 just sort of does the same thing that all of the other acts do, but I think does it a little bit better. So, let's talk about duffel bags. That's right, that is the major new mechanic that's been added to the game. It is the primary way, or the only way currently, for you to unlock the new content. The cards that you can use in your decks, the character skins, the banners, the emblems, the whatever, the sprays, the other useless, pointless things that they have in the game. And there is some issues with it. There are some bugs with it. People have been talking about getting empty bags. I personally have gotten empty duffel bags. Where, and just to explain it, only in Act 5, there is a duffel bag hidden in the mission. Literally an item that you can see, gets a highlight around it when you encounter it, you pick it up, it takes one of your inventory slots, and you need to carry it out of the mission. If you successfully complete the mission with somebody on your team carrying that duffel bag, everybody on your team gets a random unlock. It could be a card, a skin for a character, a weapon skin, a banner, right? All of the unlockables are potentially in there. And that's what the duffel bag mechanic is. As far as I can tell, and for me personally, I'm not enjoying it. It's not a fun experience. Let's try and break this down a little bit more though. And before I sort of grind into this duffel bag mechanic, I do want to play devil's advocate a little bit here about it. Personally, I have like I don't know. I don't want to say experience, but like for the last 10 years, I've been like a hobby board game designer. I just enjoy the fun of it of designing board games and things like that and mechanics, and I've made a couple of functioning board games that I've shared with friends and family and played through them and got their feedback and changed, and just like the creative process of doing that. But it's lended myself to having experience when it comes to designing something, presenting it to an audience, and then having that audience go, I don't get it. Or having your audience go, that's dumb, or that doesn't make sense to me, right? Like I've had that experience of receiving feedback from people who then I can perceive as, oh, they actually don't understand it. They don't get it. They don't get my creative process. You know what I mean? Like they just don't understand me. No, in seriousness though, like I think there's a two-way street here. But sometimes there is a pretty big disconnect between what the designer perceives the potential experience is going to be for the players, what the player experience actually is, and then what the players perceive to be the design experience. The players assume what's going on in behind the doors, the minds of the designer. And so I think a lot of people right now are going, what the hell's up with these duffel bags? They're jank. They're janky nonsense. Grindy, blah, right? No, what's happening with the duffel bags? There's been some bugs. You can get an empty duffel bag. I've heard people have been talking about getting duplicate skins. I'm pretty like 99% sure that I already had the Hot Rod Uzi skin, and I got it again. And I got it again in a duffel bag. So part one with the player experience right now with the duffel bags is, in these duffel bags, you can only unlock them in Act 5, and the contents of the duffel bag can be literally any of the unlockables. So not just content exclusive to the second expansion. You can go through a mission, get your duffel bag, open it up at the end of your mission essentially, and inside of it is one of the Christmas skins from a million years ago. There can be a skin in there that's locked behind the Skull Totem supply line track or whatever, right? Content that is not exclusive to expansion 2. And to me, this is incredibly bizarre. Incredibly bizarre. Imagine, I mean, I don't want to assume too much here. We'll go back and forth between dev experience and player experience, right? But what's happening here is that people have been hyped up for the new content of expansion 2. New skins, new cards, new banners, because I'm sure that got you really excited, right? But the new content that was going to be released in expansion 2, you'll get it by unlocking duffel bags. Cool, awesome. You go into your mission, you get your duffel bag, and you get something that has nothing to do with expansion 2. It does not feel good to unlock content that you've already had access to after purchasing or, you know, whatever, or waiting exclusively for this new content. It feels super weird to unlock content that has no relation to the new expansion that you just got. You know what I mean? And for me specifically, and I'm sure for a lot of you, the things that I care about the most are unlocking those cards. And now that I'm unlocking these duffel bags and getting old skins that I haven't unlocked yet, it feels like I'm getting punished for not grinding the totems enough. I feel like I don't get to experience the full picture of Children of the Worm expansion 2 because I didn't grind 8 hours worth of totems from the last expansion from Tunnels of Terror. Doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel good. Now, let's jump back over to the dev perspective. Why have they done this? Why do they have the duffel mechanic? Why do they even have the totem mechanic? it's about controlling progression. Controlling progression. And I agree with it. I actually agree with the idea of the duffel bag and the skull totem. It makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. When it comes to progression, or like, say like an RPG game, leveling up and making that character progression is actually a crucial part of the gameplay mechanics. It's part of, like, one of the major parts of the game entirely. In Back 4 Blood, it's a different gameplay. It's not an RPG, but it is an additional mechanic that they've added to the game with a card system, where as you play the game and earn some sort of currency, you can unlock new cards, and that's a sense of progression. And that can be fun all on its own. And that works really nicely with the replay loop of, I replay the entire game over and over again, and each time I do, I get to unlock new stuff. That's pretty cool. That's fun. I enjoy that. The issue with that, though, is that if you were to take all of the cards, all of the new content of this new expansion, and just toss it into the normal supply lines, you lose control of how that progression works. Imagine playing a JRPG, and in the first hour of gameplay, you are at max level, you've unlocked all of the abilities. There's nothing more to learn other than just playing through the experience or the story of the game. All of a sudden, that entire mechanic disappears. And maybe a game is still fun and you can still enjoy a game like that, but I think it's just you're doing yourself a disservice as a game designer if you do something like that where the progression happens way too fast. On the other side of the coin, if progression happens way too slow, players might get disinterested. Players are, if players are enjoying your game mainly because they enjoy the experience of fighting and leveling up and doing those things, if it's too slow, those players get bored, those players get frustrated. So, when it comes to Back 4 Blood, if you were just to take the cards and throw them into the normal supply line, for all of us tryhard players, all of us diehards, Back 4 Blooders, we would have all the cards unlocked instantly, right? Not, like a lot of us have are floating around 70,000 supply points. All these burn cards, I'm not gonna buy them. I don't really care. I have hundreds of these burn cards, right? So when it comes to introducing new content into the game, if it's under this same exact currency, my sense of progression is over just like that. It's instant. It's instantaneous because there's just no way to really control that. If you increase the cost of the cards too much, you dramatically slow down the progression of the players who are like submarines. The submarine players, right? Players who play a game, they enjoy the content, they leave. They submerge, or they go back into the water, right? Then new content's released, they re-emerge, they play the game again, they get their experience, they have fun, and they go back into the depths of the ocean where they lurk for new content, right? And for those players who played Back 4 Blood, had their fun in the sun, and then left, which is 100% fine and 100% correct to do, I totally get it, absolutely. Those players come back, they don't have 70,000 supply points, so how do you control their player progression, right? Do you see the discrepancy here? How if you were just to introduce, at this point in time, if you were just to introduce cards into this normal supply line, some of your player base would get all of the cards instantly, the other players would have to grind for them in a more normal sense. Introducing these skull totems, or the duffel bags, is an interesting opportunity to control that player progression, while also potentially introducing new mechanics in the game. I actually think it's really smart. Now, when it comes to the skull totems, well, let me say this. When it comes to the skull totems and the duffel bags, just in a general sense, the players are left with a choice of, do we risk our mission? Do we risk losing our run? Potentially gain items that will give us progression in the long term, right? Kind of an interesting choice. In a very general sense, we can break them down as, do the duffel bag and the skull totems, do they add depth to the game? Do they add fun to the game? And, or are they burdensome, right? Like, what's the actual overall impact for them? And when it comes to the skull totem, I personally did not enjoy grinding for skull totems. I personally don't think the skull totems themselves added a whole lot of depth to the game. The decision of, like, do I risk everything for a cosmetic right now? I don't know. It didn't feel like it really added that much of a choice to the game. But ironically enough, in order to get the skull totems, You need to go into a hive. An additional mechanic. And I think the introduction of the hive is a way more impactful game mechanic than the skull totems were. Or there's the risk of getting loot. We can potentially improve our chances of this run, or risk it for extra loot. And then once you're inside the hive, then there's the skull totems. I think the skull totem is a little bit cooler. Though overall, I personally didn't enjoy grinding for the skull totems. As you can see here, I'm just like, I don't really care. I'm not gonna. I've literally already spent hours grinding for the skull totems. So what about these? What about these duffel bags? Right? What about these duffel bags? Do they add a whole lot of depth to the game? Not really. Not really. Are they fun? Are they fun? How many of you enjoy collection grinding? I mean, when's the last time you played a game that had that token collection? It's like you know, Jack and Dexter games, like games from the '90s and early 2000s, right? Like that's an old school concept mechanic. But when it comes to this sense of progression that the duffel bags are providing, it's unbelievably slow because all of the unlockables have been sort of jam-packed into the duffel bags. Not only is it weird to unlock things that are not expansive to exclusive content, it feels like you're being punished for not grinding the earlier content in the game, though ironically, grinding for duffel bags is faster than grinding for skull totems. So for someone like me who doesn't have all the skull totem stuff, it's actually faster to do the duffel bags. But it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good, right? Because the duffel bag and the skull totems, the point of them is that you get to control the sense of progression for the entire player population. Everyone's starting off at level 0 as far as expansion 2 content is concerned, where you have to unlock those cards over time. Not only that, though, it's entirely random. It feels like a loot crate that you don't have to purchase. You're not purchasing the loot crate with money, you're purchasing it with your time, where you have to grind for duffel bags and hope that you get one of the 11 cards mixed in with the, you know, whatever 40 plus cosmetics. It's just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel good. It feels weird. In addition to that, a system like this, one inherent flaw that this sort of system has, right? Because the idea is you get to control the sense of progression. That's pretty cool. You can introduce mechanics into the game. That's pretty cool. But when it comes to, you know, getting these collectibles in a multiplayer game, you can bet your sweet patootie that we're going to find ways to exploit it and do it as fast as possible. And I apologize to everybody who is actually trying to play through the new campaign on recruit mode. I imagine for a lot of you people playing recruit mode, your player experience has probably been tainted because all of us speedrunners, all the speedrunning people have crawled out of you know, their speedrunner dens. Especially awaiting for justice. If you're playing awaiting for justice right now in recruit mode, everyone who's doing it is just farming duffel bags. Because you can literally farm duffel bags. Like you can get a duffel bag about every 5 minutes if you farm it through awaiting our justice. It's by far the fastest way to get duffel bags. And you can simply now math it out. There's a duffel bag guaranteed on every map. Essentially, oh god, what do I have here? Yeah. I mean, you can just sort of count how many cosmetics you're missing and just do the math. I've calculated that it literally takes about 5 minutes or less, maybe a little bit more depending on how competent your teammates are, to grind for a single duffel bag. And you just sort of math it out, how much time it's going to take you to get all of your cards, essentially. And so when we break it down, it's like, does the duffel bag add more depth to the game? Not really. Not really. The choice to like leave it behind or not, I don't think is super compelling. For the most part, you just always pick it up if you find it. Is it fun? Running around the map and desperately searching for a bag on the ground isn't particularly fun. You know, hunting around for it's not particularly fun. Losing a run because you spent too much time in an area and then a horde happens or somebody gets grabbed by a sleeper by mistake and then everyone dies. It doesn't feel fun. It doesn't make you go, oh man, that duffel bag's, you know, so much choice. It's so much choice when it came to looking for it or not. And oh man, it led to us being in one of those wacky situations where everything fell apart. Like I just don't think it doesn't quite get there when it comes to those two things. And so what it ends up being is just ends up being is a burden. It just ends up being a grind, right? The difference between like just the enjoy of progression or it becoming a grind, right? Like the joy of leveling up versus grinding levels to get stronger is just about the sense of burden. And when it comes to having all of the unlockables potentially in there in the duffel bag, the sense of progression for getting your cards feels very slow, and it feels like you're not in control at all because it's entirely random. At least with the skull totem track, right? You can sort of like, you can, it'll reset every whatever 30 minutes or whatever it is, and you would like, okay, the cards that I want are not here, so I'll just let it reset. I'll just let it reset. I'll just wait, right? And it felt at least they need a little bit of control over what was happening. So I think overall, what they're trying to accomplish with a duffel bag, I hope I've been coherent enough. I think I've been a little rambly here. I don't like the duffel bags, right? I understand overall what they're trying to accomplish with the duffel bags. It's essentially, they're trying to accomplish the same thing that they did with the skull totems, but do it in a different way. That's about it. But it's just, the duffel bags don't have the hive mechanic, right? So there's actually less depth to the duffel bag. Duffel bag is less interesting to the skull totem cosmetically, narratively, right? The skull totem had a little bit of mystery floating around it, right? Just overall, the duffel bag has less depth. It's not as fun as the skull totems, though. I mean, the skull totems weren't fun for me particularly, but I'm sure some of you guys had fun out there smacking stuff with the skull totem. And it feels more of a grind because it's truly random, and it feels like you're being punished for not having the other cosmetics already. But let me tell you, if you're out there right now grinding skull totems because you don't enjoy unlocking those cosmetics, the duffel bags don't. It's slower. Grinding for skull totems is dead now. You don't need to do it. You don't need to do it because if all of the cosmetics are also in the duffel bags, farming a single duffel bag is significantly faster, like unbelievably faster, than grinding for 30 skull totems so that you can buy your way through a track to get that 13 skull totem skin at the bottom of it, right? It's way faster than grinding for 7 skull totems over the course of a campaign that you've, like, the amount of time it takes to get enough skull totems to unlock a cosmetic is 3-4 times longer than it is to just grind awaiting our justice for a duffel bag. Just want to put that out there, right? And I'm trying to rack my brain out. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about the duffel bag, right? The depth, the fun. It's super slow. You feel out of control about it. It's been a frustrating experience, and it's naturally lended itself to players ruining the recruit experience for players who are actually trying to play through the game on recruit, right? Because I'm sure people are probably playing through the entire campaign on recruit, speed running around, grabbing duffel bags. It's going to end up sort of, it's going to make the player experience for those of you who are legitimately playing through recruit mode, it's going to make it less authentic, and I'm sorry for you guys. I'm sorry that you have to suffer this burden, but we need our cards. I need my cards. I need to make these decks. This is what I wanted. This is what I've been waiting for. And if I unlock another freaking hot rod skin, I'm going to lose my mind, okay? You guys get it? I think overall, it's just the duffel bag has been a frustrating experience, and it's had a little cherry on top of, like, getting empty duffel bags. Also, duffel bags don't spawn in offline mode. I have 10 plus hours hunting for duffel bags in offline mode, and I can reassure you, I've never found one. On the Trello board for Back 4 Blood, they have under actively investigating duffel bags occasionally not spawning in offline mode. Like, that's the literal wording of it. And from my personal experience, they don't spawn at all. But at least I take heart in the fact that Back 4 Blood thought that they were going to. That they were going to. I think I've rambled enough about duffel bags. So, let me surmise this, right? Let me surmise all of this. Dan is awesome. Super cool. He's the most interesting cleaner in the game. It's great. Act 5. Oh, I forgot to talk about something in Act 5. But Act 5 overall, a lot of fun. Super cool aesthetic. By far the most interesting story of all of Back 4 Blood. Though, It has the same failings of having no real substance in the long run. Really cool skeleton plot that you go, oh man, what's going on here? And then you don't learn anything, and you don't really learn anything about it in the in the end. It just gives you the slightest tease. Um, and on that note, the thing I forgot to mention was that, of course, with the new act, new bugs. There's new medicine cabinets that the bots refuse to heal themselves on. There seems to be phantom hordes happening right now, where you'll be playing through the mission, especially specifically on Act 5. So I don't think it's a bug or an issue, but it feels super weird, where you're just playing through the campaign. There's no corruption card. There's no timer for a timed horde. You're just playing through the game. There's no audio cue, but a horde spawns literally in front of you, around you, coming around the corners, jumping off of buildings, mutations crawling out of the ground around you, and there's just like, you're just like, what's happening? No one triggered anything. There's no audio happening indicating that a horde event has started. There's zero indication as to why all of a sudden you're being swarmed by zombies. And it's super weird, and it's super jarring, and it almost feels like they're mad at Amped Up or something like that, and they're like, oh, these freaking Amped Up players, card's too good. Let's make horde events happen, but nothing triggers them. When you're planting the bombs on the door, the breaching charges, they sort of start, but they make noise, so zombies in the area will charge you. It feels like there's new mechanics that basically result in you getting swarmed by zombies, but they don't technically count as horde events. And it feels like, I feel it feels like a bug, but I don't think it is. It feels super weird, and I don't understand it quite. The only thing I can wrap my hand around is like, maybe they're just trying to spice it up. Maybe they're just trying to like work around a little bit the horde-based cards like Amped Up or On Your Mark, which are super powerful cards that have been nerfed and nerfed again, and will probably should still be nerfed. And right. So, but with that being said, though, it has naturally lent itself to having Act 5 being incredibly punchy, very action-packed. Where sometimes you find yourself in a position where it's just like, if we stay here and don't move, we will eventually run out of ammo and die. So it sort of results in you having to make tougher choices, brute force your way through some areas, and be faster with your movement and be smarter about how you work together as a team. There's some really cool possibilities with it. It just feels really weird. And then finally, the duffel bag. I understand why they did it. I understand what they're trying to do with it. They're trying to control that progression. They're trying to have every player, new and old, sort of begin on the same level here as far as the new expansion is concerned, and allows them to basically sort of like, and what I mean by control the progression, it's just like, we introduce new content, and we want, how much time do we want people to play this new content? You might want to say infinitely. But the reality of it is, if people are going to pay X amount of money, do we feel justified in charging this price based off of the length of the campaign and how long it takes for them to unlock all of the content, right? And it's sort of, in a very general sense, how many hours of fun have we provided for the price that we are charging? And that's what like one of the like behind the mind psychological things for game design that's happening here when it comes to the duffel bag and the skull totems. It's about controlling that experience so that players get to have the joy. Oh my god, maybe just scared the crap out of me. I don't know if you caught that on the microphone. It scared me. Oh, jarring. Can we, what was I talking about, progression? Can we, do the players get to progress through the game, essentially level up by unlocking new cards at a fun and happy pace, while still having to spend some time in the game? That's basically the goal of it all. And with the duffel bags, it has, I think, fallen completely flat. It's the same concept as the skull totems, but the skull totems were more successful in accomplishing that. And the duffel bags have failed. They have failed. And it's actually really cool, I think, designing. I hope for Turtle Rock over there, they're nerding out over like, oh man, we've learned so much about what we're trying to do here because the skull totems worked much better and the duffel bags have not. I hope their brains get bigger because I think it's really cool. I think design that sort of design journey is really cool in general, which is why I've picked up the hobby of designing board games, because that journey of learning over time is actually really satisfying. And so at the very least, rest assured, you guys, that Turtle Rock is maybe having a lot of fun to some degree designing a video game. That's pretty cool, right? And that's what the duffel bag is for them. That was their fun. But ultimately, the duffel bag has failed, I think, and what it's trying to accomplish. It's been horrible, and it's not been a very fun experience. I talked about 5 minutes, and this is the last thing about the duffel bag. I talked about, like, you can grind one duffel bag about every 5 minutes. And you might think, it wouldn't feel like a grind if you just play through the game normally and didn't worry about unlocking the content in a swift manner. Get over your instant gratification mentality. Yeah, I don't know, Zoomer or whatever. I don't know, whatever people say. I don't know about this generationism that's going on here, right? But the reality of it is, I've done the math. I've already grinded duffel bags for like 4 hours, and I don't have all the cards yet. Like, right? Again, it feels like I'm being punished for not having the other cosmetics beforehand. If I were to play through normally on no hope mode or on nightmare mode, how long would it take for me to unlock all of this freaking stuff? And half of it is banners and emblems, things that literally no one else can see except for you. Right? Well, there's cosmetics that just have no relevance in the game. That's a whole other story on its own that we didn't even get into. So for the most part, the overall experience, it's not necessarily the time, the grind, that's the issue. It's the overall experience of just unlocking things that you don't care about, having no control over it, that lends itself to people going into the grind of cheesing the duffel bags one after another, and then that sort of compounds itself into, this isn't fun. It doubles down. It's not fun unlocking things you don't care about. It's not fun having no control over it. It's not fun feeling like you have to unlock other things before you unlock the new content that you've already purchased. And then that sort of goes to, well, how do I end this unfun experience as quickly as possible? We cheese awaiting our justice as quickly. We get as many duffel bags as possible by doing this mission over and over again. And that also then results in, well, this is not fun. Duffel bags are not fun. In real life or in Back 4 Blood. So, I think I've rambled enough. Hopefully I can figure out how to timestamp this crap. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about it. Did I miss anything? I feel like I probably missed stuff, but this is good enough. Overall, Dan is great. Summary number 2. Dan is great. Act 5 overall, awesome. Though Act 5, of course, has some janky, weird stuff in it. Act 5 is not perfect. It's got some frustrating things in it, but overall, Act 5, awesome. Super cool. Duffel bags, horrible. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it, and I will see you in the future.